Welcome. Welcome to this week's BTO talk on generative AI. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's talk. My name is Michael Alf, calling from Lisbon, working with companies and helping them on their GenAI and AI digital transformation journey. And I'm here with my partner, Markus.
Hi, Michael. Thanks a lot. Markus Keiper, professor at the National University of Singapore and co-founder together with our two partners, Rob, who is not here today, and Michael. I'm greeting you from Malaysia today, but of course it's an artificial background at the moment. I'm not in this room. Michael, we discussed a little bit before we started today, and we sensed that it's about time to share a few technological adoptions and use cases, which you have discovered over the last couple of weeks and months, and you actually worked on a couple of things. What excites you the most at the moment?
Absolutely, Markus. Yeah, I think it's a good idea just to give some examples. Let me start with one interesting news I want to share from Airbnb, and then I go into some examples, kind of which are more on a smaller scale and relevant for you as well. This just shows kind of the magnitude. And basically what happened at Airbnb, they did a IT transition, migration, and usually their planned time horizon was 1.5 years for this exercise. So it's a significant project, and they actually managed that to do in 1.5 months. So this is kind of a 10x reduction, basically, of time. Any thoughts on that, Markus? Because I think that's pretty astonishing when you heard that the first time.
It is. We just discussed that, and I couldn't believe it. 6 months compared to 1.5 years. What does it mean for jobs? And what does it mean for you as maybe a small or medium-sized organization? Because Airbnb, you might think, is a big organization. They probably had a huge budget for that. Michael, two questions. What does it mean to the workforce of coders? And I know that you have another example for that. And where do you think is this applicable for smaller organizations in the future?
Yeah, I think great questions. So the first one, it's very hard to tell. Actually, nobody really knows. And when you look at a country like India, there's hundreds of millions of coders there. And so it's one of the most important business segments, clearly. Yeah, and similar in many other countries where it's very relevant. What we've seen in the past, that actually the more there is in terms of technology, the more opportunity and the more work there is. Yeah, so we had this kind of death of the coder, I think beginning of the 80s, and then it blossomed. Yeah, and today coders are in high demand. It's interesting to see what LLMs, and this is kind of what GenAI does here for coding, will have an impact. It seems the impact is bigger than we think it is. The question is then, is that opening new opportunities in terms of creativity, or is it actually leading to a reduction? So that's kind of, it's open the race, and we'll see what happens over the next actually only coming months. Yeah, we're not talking about years here. Yeah, it's really changing in front of our eyes. What that means for smaller companies and mid-sized companies, there's plenty of opportunity to do really cool things. Yeah, and I encourage you really to embrace that. And I'll give you two examples. One is I'm doing virtual events, for example. Yeah, so I run and organize virtual events with a team, and one of the tasks is to use these designs and convert them, compress them, things like that, to make it workable, for the user. And that was a manual task. And I was tired of that. I thought, oh, there might be a better option. And I created now actually 2 or 3 tools which help me in this process. This tool
how did you create them? Did you spend weeks and usually nights in coding?
Yes, well, I'm not the greatest coder. I did some coding when I was young, but kind of not a lot is left over. So I go to NoCode solutions, and especially for these tools, they are pretty remarkable now in the quality. Yeah, so you basically prompt them. So what happens is you use your language to tell the tool what you want. It produces something. Then you say, oh, that's not right exactly where I need to have it. Change the color, change the function, and then comes up with a new solution. Works really, really well. For smaller applications, definitely. For larger, it's of course more complex. Yeah, and it takes much shorter. So let's say the tools, instead of, I don't know, 3 days, 4 days, maybe a week, depending on the availability of the coder, takes now an hour, maybe 2 hours. Yeah, again, you have this
And
10x.
it takes you an hour to create something. And tell us, does that then look like, I wouldn't show this to anyone else, or does it look like, hey,
Great question.
it does the job. The UX, the user experience, and the user interface is good enough to actually work with it immediately?
It actually is, yeah. So it's a really nice UI with a nice upload button. It's described what to do, what happens, and it's very functional. So it's sleek, which is exactly what we need for these tasks, because we do that again and again. Yeah, so there's quite a number of these images which need to be converted, reduced, compressed, whatever. So it's like, well, you click either then upload a number of files or one file, and it works really well. That's only one example. Yeah, I give you another example.
Just before we go there,
yes, sure.
Michael, a question. So what you used it for a fairly repetitive task. For example, I have these designs and they are in a certain format, but I need to have them in a different format and compressed and whatever, which means usually you would do this manually and you would spend minutes or sometimes hours if the job is big. And what you're saying is tasks like that can easily be, through no coding, be created, even from people who don't know so much about it, or do you need to have some basic knowledge about that?
I would say you need curiosity more than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the willingness to open yourself up to something new. That's what I would say. It's technically, for these simple tools, simple solutions, there's nothing you really need. You go in there and you work on that. Look, if you want to have a training session or something like that, reach out to us and we can set something up. And to kind of bring you closer to it, it is relatively straightforward and not difficult. Of course, if you want to create something more, let's say, tangible, significant, with more functionality, it's a little bit different, and it's not everyone's kind of cup of tea, as Rob would say. But it has become a lot easier. Yeah. So, and the key distinction or difference now is that we use our natural language to do these things. So prompting becomes super important in everything we do, as we know also from the use from LLMs.
Okay, so really knowing what prompting is and how to prompt engineer, which is the next level, then becomes almost like another language we need to be able to talk in the future, right?
Absolutely, which actually leads me to that second example. That's a client, she just finished kind of her PhD, and she is, of course, wants to publish articles now, on LinkedIn, in newspapers, and whatever kind of opportunity there is, to be known and to spread the word and the research. And so we created a solution which actually does that. So it uses the research, the paper, the PhD, and then you can say, okay, I want to write a LinkedIn post on that specific topic out of the thesis for this particular audience. So you can kind of either drop down, very simple user front end, and then the tool basically creates this initial draft. It's, of course, as we always say, it's not the final version. It is a first draft. Usually, especially for smaller articles, kind of LinkedIn and things like that, it's actually really, really good. Of course, if you want to do a kind of a larger article, it might take some iteration and still some work. But think about that. That reduces the time from, let's say, a week for an article, if it's a really good article, maybe sometime, and you know that better than I, to, let's say, a day. Suddenly you have again the same reduction, about 5x, 10x, in terms of time savings.
Well, so sticking with this example, if anyone like your client has a lot of content, let's say 300 pages of content about a subject matter expertise, it can be either academic or it can be engineering or technical or whatever. And this person says, I want to start a career. I want to spread the content of my PhD in this case. I need to have academic articles, which have to be well researched. I have to have social media and so on. In the past, this person would have spent a lot of time simply distilling stuff from their own written document into a new article. How long does it take now to do that? If I say, give me the 10 top topics of my PhD for this topic, how long does it take to create that?
Well, we talk about literally once the solution is ready. And by the way, the solution encompasses a lot of prompting. So again, there's a couple of elements, but at the core, there's still a lot of prompting, to make it to get that right. Once the solution is ready, we'll talk about minutes. And the beauty is, if you have the same topic, let's say the 10 or let's say the 5 most important insights of the PhD, and then you say, well, but this is written for consultants, this is written for teachers, this is written for the consumer. You will get different results tailored to the needs and the tone of voice of this clientele. And I think that's what makes it so powerful, so that it automatically creates something which actually reads well for that particular target group on the topic related, of course, to the content. And again, that content sits in the back. So it's like, of course, a PhD thesis is much bigger. If you have, let's say, a kind of simpler paper or a book like we have with our B2B metaverse marketing, then you can actually do that with a chatbot. So you easily create your own chatbot, and you can work really well with that. You can even host that somewhere. If it's bigger, so if you're what you mentioned just before, there's a lot more material, you need some more sophisticated solutions. It's still doable, and it saves you, plenty of time in your future work.
Plenty of time and plenty of money, because imagine in the past, this particular person would be able to maybe publish 1 article per month, because it has to be proofread and everything. And now you can have a couple of articles per month, which exponentially increases your reach to your audiences around the world. And then, Michael, last question on the topic. Now maybe the Journal of Education in Canada, which usually publishes in French, asks, we would love to have your article on that topic in French. Is that difficult?
Well, even that becomes a lot easier than before. The quality of translation for models which are tailored to translation is getting really, really high. It's still, and I'm using that in some projects, it's still sometimes tricky. So you have to be, because it's a very specific language. The biggest challenge still is that if you can't speak French, you can't validate, of course, the translation. That's actually the biggest problem. So you as an author, just you have to rely on others and trust others that they do the quality check for you. It's a good example, Markus. As you know, we are doing our Maverick simulation, so GenAI simulation, into German. So that's one which will be available basically as we speak. So if that's interesting for you in German, then reach out. And we do a second one in Arabic. Now, we are both Germans. That makes it easier. Even there, we shortcut it, and we used some LLMs to do the first draft. And then actually, we improved that and proofread that, because we want to make sure that the quality is right. That becomes significantly more challenging in Arabic, because neither you nor I speak Arabic or can read Arabic. So we can actually translate into Arabic, and it's really impressive to see the quality which actually works. And I'll give you a trick in a moment. But the validation is the problem. So the trick: how can you assess if the LLM works for you? And you can try that out. You can do that in ChatGPT, of course, in Claude, or kind of models which are tailored for translation. So you use kind of the text you want to translate.
Let me try that. Let me try
Yes.
that because you are the engineer here. Let me try that. So if you what you're saying is translate your original English text into Arabic, and if I use your logic now, I have an Arabic version.
Yes.
I will use this version and translate it back into English.
Absolutely.
And then I compare, and then I ask it, the LMM or GenAI tool we are using, and it's Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, compare the two versions, right?
Absolutely. Either they compare or you can compare. I mean, you can see, that, okay, is the outcome good enough? It will never be 100%, of course, because that's not how translations work. Yeah. So the question is the back and forth translation still reflecting the original one? And the silent, the exercise with the silent male. Yeah, we say a sentence in a circle.
Yep.
This is a little bit like that. Yeah, where you do 2 steps into a language and then back to the language or into another language and see if it still remains the key contents. It's a really nice little exercise which I recommend you try out. It's fun and it's great to see what works and what doesn't work.
Ladies and gentlemen, here you have it. We just basically did a kind of little consulting session here. These are real topics, by the way. Michael talked about real examples we have been working on, and Michael in particular in Beyond the Obvious. Imagine what it can do for you in the future. You might have a marketing brochure and you are going to a exhibition in another country. You need to translate that. How would you have done it in the past? How much money would you have spent? How much effort in order to find a translator and vendor and then print it again? Now you can do it in your own office or at home at the kitchen table. You just need to know how to do it. You don't need to be a coder or a programmer at all. And this is only the beginning. The future will be even more easier for many, many day-to-day tasks and office tasks as well, wouldn't it, Michael?
Absolutely. And I'll give you one other little trick which I'm using. So I'm using translation a lot. Yeah. So I'm working on an international project for kind of between France, Germany, Czech Republic, and the US. So that's very international for 4 languages. So I need that all the time. And even if I could translate, I usually get this translated because it's just faster. Yeah. So if you have a paragraph, if you have a slide, it's just kind of faster to do it this way. One of the nice things for a prompt in ChatGPT is translate the following to English, for example. And I always use EN as capital E, capital N. You don't have to even write English. Yeah. And then you paste the text. And then usually what you get, the ChatGPT says, okay, here is the English version. And then the text comes. And you have multiple blocks. Then you say, here's another one. Please only produce the result. And then you only get the result because then you can actually paste and copy. You click the copy symbol and you don't have to take out kind of the leading intro and extro. Yeah. And then you can even go further. You then paste each block without prompting. Because the LLM knows, okay, you want to have to translate it and you want to have only the result. Yeah, nothing else but the result. Yesterday I did that. It's really nice, block after block, and you have quickly translated a presentation. I hope that's another bonus tip which helps you. And with that, Markus, over to you for the closing comments.
Absolutely. Look, today was a little bit of talking out of the garage of Michael Alf and what we are doing in Beyond the Obvious. By the way, we are still a company with 3 people. We are not hiring. We are getting support, of course, but we are not building a whole team of 20 people. So whatever you see from us is actually made by us. We invite you to reach out to us if you have a question, if you want to get started. We will have a webinar probably soon again as well. We will talk about that, Michael, right? And yeah, feel free. The message we would like to share with you is get started. GenAI will change everything you do, whether it's in government services, public services, and private companies, or even if you're in an NGO. Or if you're writing a thesis, it will help you big time. We have the community here. Feel free to join us here, and then you get the newsletter after each podcast we do every week, and reach out to us if you need more. Thank you, and bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Nice. You even mentioned the